All right. Well, thankfully, we're now wading out of unfamiliar foreign territory and going back to something that I just know a little bit, tiny bit more, which is the EU scene in particular. So we got a lot of news in particular with this. Not necessarily with just the EU scene, but a lot of stuff that's stacked up. So the first one being Laser Kittenz, signed by Cloud9 of all organizations. Nobody could have seen this. Alicus, the absolute god of trading, the barter man himself, somehow whisked away with this deal. It is the most left-wing thing. I woke up and I was like, what the heck is going on here? I'm happy for him because there's a lot of players on Laser Kittenz that deserve this. But geez Louise, not only that, but he's swindled out the London Overwatch League spot as well. He's got that underneath him. He's like, I trade you my old second-hand car and 2 rocks, and it's a good deal, yeah? It's a good deal. And he's like, yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Take my firstborn daughter.
You probably learned to barter quite young in Egypt. That's where he was born. So yeah. I think important to note that they did lose Munchkin and Claris. I think they cut Munchkin because he wasn't willing to... I mean, the official story is he wasn't willing to learn English and communicate with the team properly, and Claris... I don't remember why Claris left, to be honest.
He was offered Overwatch League.
That's right. Yeah,
trials or something.
And so I do think with the addition of Nevix, yes, he's a solid player, but I do think that this is a step down from the old Laser Kittens. Now, with that said, I think they're still a top 4 team within EU, and they should be able to do quite well within Contenders Season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Alicus has been able to reach his goal of being able to get his team into the Overwatch League. I think, some people, Gilfrost put out a thing on Medium where he was saying that he thinks that they're just going to leave the EU team in Contenders and build a North American team for Overwatch League. I definitely disagree with that. I think that this North American team for Cloud9 is dead in the water.
I agree.
And believe that back before we realized that like Shofor is now a sub for FaZe and Gods is subbing for Renegade, Kungarna and all of this stuff that just came out today. But it looked... And we put out a couple of reports, like Cloud9 had been dead since they failed to get into the Contenders and were planning to rebuild or pick up another roster or something. Now, we didn't know what was going to happen, but they ended up picking up the Laser Kittens roster. And I think it's very probable that they're going to end up being at least the core of the roster that ends up representing London.
Yeah, and it makes sense because this is an EU team that would be representing London rather than the
with
NA
a British
team.
player.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it does bring up an interesting point that, I mean, people were concerned that Overwatch League wouldn't actually have the best teams in Overwatch, mostly because people were comparing it over to Apex and the depth of the Korean scene. But given that a lot of the teams that are forming, teams like NRG are going for like I don't really want to say super team, but they're trying to build a really good team themselves, and it's possible that like the New York spot with Robert Kraft, Hook, is potentially trying something similar, given that he's kind of flying around places and talking to people. We don't really know what's going on there, but if they're going for like a super team approach, that's sharply contrasted to teams just kind of picking up wholesale rosters where you know how they're going to perform. And that's not so bad if you're... I mean, it's not bad at all if you're picking up Lunatic High, because they are the best team in Overwatch. And it's not so bad if you're picking up Immortals, because they've been proven that they can compete with some of the best teams in Overwatch. But it is slightly concerning if you have 10 spots in a league that's supposed to be, the absolute 10 best. They're pitching it as if it's the 10 best spots, 10 best teams in Overwatch, and you end up picking a team that's kind of 4th best in Europe and probably on about the in the top 20 teams in the world, but might actually not crack that. But I think they would
potentially. I think probably around 10 to 15 ranges.
I've heard I've heard things behind the scene that people claiming that this Cloud9 roster, in terms of EU, is definitely going to be contending with E United in the top spot with 1, 2, 3 as well.
I mean, they certainly could, but even so, I mean, if they're on that level, if they're actually on the level where they're contending with the United, then fair enough. But if it's the same level that we've seen of them,
not proven yet.
Yeah, if they're on the same level as we've seen from them last season, and I can't really see why they would have had a massive improvement, especially since they dropped probably their best player in Munchkin and have added Nevix. But if they continue to improve, fair enough. But if you're picking up teams that are around that level, then I think you've got to consider that there are going to be some Contenders teams that are going to be better than some OWL teams. There's definitely going to be an overlap there, and partly that just makes me really excited because then you've got genuine good competition in Contenders, which is what has been labeled like the tier 2 teams of Overwatch, and they're going to be going on at the same time. Perhaps that'll even be better for viewership as well, because people will want to see that. Perhaps that'll incentivize them to have better tournaments in the off season as well, and not just have the World Cup, but have proper inter-regional tournaments where you can really see where the best teams are.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of points there in that one little section there. Will the Overwatch League teams be worse than the Contenders teams? We covered that as well. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Contenders Season 1. Dun, 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 dun. Let's start with the format.
Is this how you're going to be casting it?
I am, but we won't get to that just yet. My ego's not that large. But format is going to be round robin, games on the weekends, all games streamed, and a LAN finals in October. That is tasty. The complete package.
The complete package, yeah. I mean, I'm not actually sure which teams are going to the LAN finals as well. I mean,
top four.
Is it top
four in each group? Yep. I read the rules.
It's not international.
You read the rule book.
It's not international,
recently.
Right?
No. As far as I know, it's not EU teams playing against North American teams or anything like that. They have their own. They have their own system. But yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty good format for what's going on. Actually, it gives you consistent coverage over the course of a season, mirrors in some sense what the Overwatch League presumably is going to be doing. It looks like they're kind of testing out the format and getting more towards this kind of format set that they've been using for the World Cup as well. I would be surprised if we didn't see something like that for Overwatch League. And they've got so many good teams in Contenders that each week is actually there's going to be one at least really good game.
I think this tournament's really great, but the one thing I'm a bit disappointed in is that I wish they had an international finals to conclude it, because we haven't had a Western international tournament in so long, outside of, barring Take, which some of the best Western teams didn't even attend, or, were busy. And I think that the one other thing I want to note is I'm not so sure I'm a fan of the best, or not the best of four, but the four map set, right? Because it gives you consistent broadcast times, but sometimes it doesn't give you a winner, and sometimes I don't know, I think it just forces maps too much when teams might not be. Put it this way, I want to see teams compete on the maps that they're best at rather than the maps that are enforced, right?
Yeah, from my point of view, in terms of if I was crafting the ideal format, for not just competitive integrity, but just like enjoying seeing the best teams compete on the best playing fields and have a tension throughout the match, the peaks in there being a winner or a loser, then I go for something more default like CSGO has been doing for the whole time. But I think it's very clear that Overwatch and Blizzard are pushing like having this 4-map series for its consistent broadcast time. Now, whether that means in the future they're going to be pitching to television or something, because I mean, you don't need consistent broadcast time if you're doing Twitch. It's not that bad for just scheduling tournaments, to the point where you'd want to create a whole new format that's unlike anything else that's seen otherwise, that leads to you sometimes playing maps that are literally unnecessary, like when we saw the UK team playing who was it, Germany, and they were just kind of messing about at the end of Route 66. Yeah, I mean, and Monty and Dora as well are like, well, that kind of got silly towards the end there, but they're already through to BlizzCon, so, that kind of thing. I mean, it kind of, in some sense, detracts from the rest of the series. It happens in specific situations, but also that's like a minor version of the problem that has always existed with round robin, in that you are eventually, in any league that uses round robin, and people have been doing this for years and years and years, or group stages for years and years and years and years and years, you're going to have games that don't matter at the end of it. You're already going to have your games, your teams locked in for the playoffs, but some of these lower teams have still just got to play each other for like random pride of who finished 5th and who finished 6th, when it doesn't make any difference because they're not in the playoffs anyway. That's just something that happens with round robin, unless you're willing to just call it as soon as the playoff teams are in, which, as far as I'm aware, no league in the world does. So that's just something that happens with round robin as well, in like a larger sense, and then in a smaller sense it also happens with the 4-map series.
All very good points, all very valid as well. So that's the format. We've talked a little bit about that. Now we can sate our own egos by talking about the talent. So it's gonna be me and Sideshow, and that's it. We're doing a whole event. No, we got some others. We got Mr. X.
Can you imagine how grueling that would be?
Just us
doing the
doing
whole of Contenders as 2 people. That would be ridiculous. I mean, that's almost like what Monty Odoa did for Apex, except you would have to cast like 5 games a day rather than 2.
That would be horrible. Honestly, as much as I love casting Overwatch, that's like your custom made hell, isn't it? Bespoke fitted for you. Just like having to do like that's so many hours in one day. But regardless of that, we've got Mr. X. We've got Golden Boy as well, so that's going to be the North American casting pair, which is Mr. X and Golden Boy. And then you've got Puckett, which if you don't know, he's like he does. I believe he casts Call of Duty at the moment, but he also does hosting and interviews and stuff for CS:GO.
Very experienced, very polished.
He's super experienced, super polished. Fantastic host as well. From the stuff I have watched, I don't watch much Call of Duty, but even I've heard of Chris. His name is Chris, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not just butchering that. Yeah, Chris Puckett. But, yeah, thank God. But but I know him to be a polished guy. Same with Mr. X and Gold Boy, very polished with the roles. And of course, left guy, Mr. Gilfrost, he's going to be taking the role of the North American analyst. Going to be working with you, Sideshow, on the desk. So you're the EU analyst. I imagine. I'm not too sure what the sort of situation we've got going on with that, but it will probably be you two on the desk with Puckett being the host and talking through the games. And then it's me and ZP casting the EU sort of region. So this is going to be a fantastic talent lineup. Very curious to see how this is going to play out. But I'm absolutely buzzed to be working with all these guys because this is a stacked talent roster.
Yeah, the last time these guys worked Overwatch events Golden Boy's been doing the World Cup, right? And he's been a host in that sense. Yeah. He did casting back at the Overwatch Open. Yeah. And Mr. X and Puckett did casting at MLG as well. And Mr. X was casting the Overwatch Open as well.
And World Cup.
And the World Cup.
Yes, yeah. So these guys have been involved, they're around. They are not like the regular people that you perhaps might expect, like your ZPs, Hex, Monty, Doa, although ZP is there, but they're not like the staples of the scene, but they're the people who like do everything and also do Overwatch and then coming in, and I think they're going to add a lot in terms of entertainment value actually as well. They're very entertaining people.
They're very polished, very entertaining guys. This is what I'm most looking forward to, is just meeting up with them. I reckon it's going to be a class act. Golden Boy just reminds me of a guy you can just sit down with, have a couple of drinks, and God knows where it's going to end up, No,
he's very unfriendly in person,
God knows where that's going to end up.
No, he's just not friendly at all. Golden Boy. No. Cold shoulder to everybody, he looks so warm and friendly, and then you talk to him, he's get out my face. No, he's a warm fuzzy teddy bear.
Harsha, any opinions on the casting talent other than the fact that me and Sideshow probably shouldn't be there?
Oh, you covered it for me. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, looks exciting. Definitely looks like. I think it's been noted that JCap was originally going to do EU with you. I think he made that public, right? I'm not leaking anything.
He did, okay. I believe.
So
it was posted in Flames Discord. So
yeah, it would
covered.
It would make sense to see him doing EU, but I think this looks like a pretty exciting talent list. Anyways, gonna be exciting to see left guy not doing hosting.
Yeah.
Left guy might not actually be on the left. I'm sorry to blow all of your minds, but he genuinely might not be. I'm not sure.
Well, I'd imagine he's probably going to be in the middle somewhere. Middle guy. Oh, God. One thing I want to
middle
mention.
guy is already taken.
Go on.
That's Gex.
Yeah, middle guy's already taken. He has to be right guy.
Yeah, he has to be right guy.
It's his evil alter ego for Contenders Season 1.
We're going to see him break out like a fake mustache for the death now.
Fake? He's been working on growing it for years.
This evil mustache.
Months.
Top hat as well.
Since Contenders Season 0, he hasn't shaved. He's just kept his mustache going.
One thing I wanted to mention is that, like you said, Jason Kaplan was meant to be doing the EU portion with myself, doing that EU side of casting. That would have, in my mind, this is something that I don't think people who watch Overwatch realize, but there's obviously different types of casters, for one. So there's like the sort of
good casters, bad casters.
There's good casters, there's bad casters.
Which one are you,
for
Bren?
One? I don't know where I'm falling in this category.
All right, okay.
Stop trying to bait me. Right. But, you know, you have like the Monty Doa style, which is very conversational. You know, it's very relaxed, you know, quite banterous, but they've got the analysis thrown in. Very polished as well. That's the one thing immediately you're drawn to, is it does feel like a conversation that you're included in. And then you've got me and Uber. Uber's on a much higher level than I am, but it's a kind of casting where you're just kind of shouting 24/7. Uber does it a lot less so, but I still need to learn how to tone it down, and that's like the hype casting. And then ZP and Hex, I guess you could say, they're almost conversational in a way. ZP used to be hype caster. I don't really know why I'd label him these days, but
I think he's a bit of both.
Yeah, a bit of both. He's in the middle ground, but this is the challenge, because Jason Kaplan used to casting with Uber. Would have been quite a good pairing. Me and ZP are going to be, in the nicest way possible, this is going to be a very challenging sort of caster pair, because we're both sort of used to being the sort of play-by-play guys, so we're both going to be having to take a bit on our shoulders of the analyst sort of role. ZP's much more used to this than I am, because he's having a lot more experience casting with Uber and stuff, so it's going to be a big challenge. I'm looking forward to it, for one.
Bren's going to have to do something he hasn't done in a long, long time. Be quiet.
Use his brain.
Use my brain.
Be quiet.
I did actually do color casting in the H&D Invitational way back. So, and it was an interesting challenge. That was pure color casting. But this is, I think we both decided it's going to be a sort of hybrid. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. We've got 6 weeks to work for it together. You know, obviously it's going to be a bit shaky to begin with, but yeah, by the end of it, we're going to be a well-polished unit. We're going to be feeding each other breakfast at the table, dressing each other, tying each other's ties.
Bathing each other.
I'm not getting involved. I'm not saying anything.
All right. Okay, and now we can move on to the second section, which is... Whoa,
no, you can't. I'm halting you for a second, because I think it might be quite interesting to talk about the fact that Liquid and Movistar sold their spots in Contenders.
That's what I was about to talk about.
Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry, I thought you were moving on.
Botched.
Oh, no. Let me finish first. You just robbed me at the moment. You just jumped in. Like, actually, Bren, we're going to talk about EnVision and GamersOrigin.
I should have more trust in you.
Literally about to mention that.
This is why.
Sorry, Bren. Literally about to talk about.
This is why the two of you aren't casting together.
This is true. Yeah. I just
no synergy.
I expect less from you.
Jesus Lord Almighty.
The one thing I want to note about this is that it is interesting that the organization gets a spot when it's an open tournament in theory, because season 1 of this tournament was, you know, anybody could just make a mixed team and enter, but instead of, you know, just giving the players a spot, the organization gets it. I don't think that makes much sense. I think that if you had to have an org to get in, it would have made more sense. But at the same time, I understand the other point of view in that orgs are paying players to play. Like, they should get a payout. So I'm not sure where I fall on that issue, but I do think I tend to side more with the players getting the spot.
What would have happened if FNRGFE decided to drop their team? Would the team captain get to sell the spot for X $1,000?
Yeah, see? That is an interesting issue.
I mean, presumably they would. Yeah. They owned the spot the same way as an organization would. Did NIP realize that when they passed it over to the team that would then become Giganti? I mean, potentially, but if they'd known that they would then get picked up by Giganti, then they could have, you know, directly sold the spot to them rather than just allow them to be picked up. And Movistar Riders as well sold their spot over to GamersOrigin. I think the fact that it's EnVision and GamersOrigin buying the spots indicates that the price was probably fairly low, and I mean nowhere near the kind of $20 million reported Overwatch League spots. I mean, we're not even in the same universe as those, and for good reason as well, because it's not franchised, it's not the elite thing. You don't get any of the benefits for it. You're literally buying just into a tournament, and because the promotion and relegation systems aren't even set up, I mean, you don't even know whether you're going to be in it next season or what. So I thought it was very interesting, actually, that Blizzard have decided to set up a system where the organization gets the benefits from getting into the league, because they've quite firmly put the power there in terms of in the hands of the organization rather than in terms of the players, and that has generally been unpopular when you look at other esports, particularly Counter-Strike. When you look at those guys, the format for their majors and stuff like this is always passed on the basis of, do you have 3 or more of the players, and then you'll get the exact same spot. It's never done based on the organization there.
But I do think it's interesting to note that I think they want to make this tournament look appealing to sponsors so that they'll continue to be a part of the Overwatch ecosystem. At the same time, I feel like now you should have given the power to the players and then handed it over to the organization come season 1 and down the road, right? Does that make
that makes sense to me, because the entire purpose of season 0 was to get, like, the reason that they had this format where not all of the games were streamed and there was a massive open qualifier and there was so many games going on, and it's like double round robin, really thoroughly getting the best teams that they could into Contenders Season 1 for the players, so that the best players were in the best positions, the best teams were in the best positions in Contenders Season 1. And so the fact that then when one of them drops, it's not just passed down to the players, but instead an organization goes counter to their plans for Contenders Season 1 for Contenders Season 0 in my mind. But it makes sense moving forward for Contenders Season 1 to Season 2 to provide like an extra advantage and give more value to the spot, so that sponsors actually want to be, or organizations rather, want to be involved in Contenders. You know, you're adding value to the spot rather than it just being the value being the opportunity to play within the tournament and potentially win the prize money, advertise yourself to sponsors, etc. So you're adding more value to the sport, but you're potentially reducing the competitiveness of the league, but only in very specific situations. Are you really going to get situations where like some terrible team actually signs up? And in both cases, even though they were sold, they went to quite possibly the next best teams.
Yes, yeah, I'd imagine Blizzard probably would have had some say in that potentially.
I'm not sure actually. I mean, maybe.
You don't think so?
But maybe. But when there's money involved, you can't like. You're deliberately screwing with the market in that sense, aren't you? Yeah. If Blizzard had said, okay, you have to sell it to EnVision, and EnVision are like, well, we're only paying £2 for it, then what are Liquid supposed to do?
They start bartering. The Alka special.
What? And then do what?
I'm kidding.
Say,
hold on to it.
No. Yeah, we'll hold on to it then. We'll field.
We'll just forfeit every week.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it gets very weird if you're selling the sport, but Blizzard are also enforcing too much. You have to kind of let the market do its work there in some sense. But at the same time, it's very odd. I agree with you that 2 small organizations ended up taking the spots. Does that mean that nobody else really wanted them? I suppose anybody bigger than that has really got their eyes set on Overwatch League, perhaps. Or was already in there anyway.
All right, well, let's get into the meat of these roster changes. This is the reason we postponed this podcast here. Postponed.
Bren does all of his communication through Royal Mail with a cell phone.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
He packages up his cell phones, like, does them up, postpones it.
I'm going to walk out in a minute, and I'm going to be done. All right, listen. It was my bedtime 4 hours ago. I'm not made for this. I'm not cut out for this.
You better get used to this NA schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus. Lord Almighty. Regardless, let's move on quickly, please. Contenders NA. We're going to talk about these roster changes. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of stuff to get through.
There really
Big
is.
one. Colsty, a player who used to play for Movistar Riders. He is now subbing on Rogue,
and it does seem to
while
be,
Wins plays in the Quake tournament.
Yeah, it does seem to just be a 1 week thing according to Unco. It's just for the 1 week where Wins has to go to Quake, or what is it, QuakeCon? It's not QuakeCon, is it?
QuakeCon, yeah.
It is QuakeCon.
Yeah, it's QuakeCon. He's playing Quake Champions with Liquid.
Okay.
So he's playing with like ID, Rafa, Dahang. I thought it was quite strange actually that it's only for that 1 week, because presumably Wins is like scrimming Quake Champions or something. Does he literally just not give a shit about this QuakeCon tournament? I don't get it. Like, how is he scrimming for with his team for Overwatch and also Quake Champions? Maybe he's just going mental and like scrimming.
I know he's
full on like 18 hours a day.
Potentially,
but
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was strange, because also I could imagine a world in which this was a more perhaps not permanent, but more than just for the 1 week, because Colsty coming in on tank. Colsty, I don't know whether his Winston is actually better than Nox's, but his Winston was also excellent when he played with Movistar Riders. He was
really
one of their best.
Pit.
Yeah, it was fantastic there. And his Reinhardt is also really good. He's not just a one-trick Winston. And though we haven't seen too much of it from Nox, he definitely seems like he's favoring the Reinhardt far less. And if the meta does go that way, I can imagine bringing somebody in like Colsey would be a big boon for them. But then Wins and Nox are also their dual callers, and so one of them presumably in that situation would then be playing Lucio, and one of them would perhaps be coaching. I can see a world in which that happens, but doesn't seem to be this one at the moment.
All right, well, FaZe now. Moving on to the FaZe Clan. FaZe up, boys. They've added Carpe and Surefour to sub. So this is just more evidence that the NA side of Cloud9 has just been dismantled thoroughly, and the vultures of other NA orgs are just slowly picking up the scraps. But yeah, we'll see how this is going. What's your thoughts on this, at least, then, Harsha?
Carpe is definitely sick. Surefour is definitely sick. Shadowburn is sick. Yep. They have some of the best DPS in the West, actually. It's so weird to see Surefour as a substitute on the team, but I think this is just more because it's a last-minute thing. They don't really know how they're going to fit into the system. I mean, I don't really know what they'll end up fielding, because I could see all three of these players starting, right? I don't know. It's hard to say, but these are some of the best DPS in America.
Maybe they're just, it's like a strategic move, you know? Keeping them away from enemy teams by putting them on the sub role. Not actually going to use them. They're just taking the pieces away from the other players.
Could be.
Yeah. I mean, I think from what Surefour said on stream, he's still contracted to Cloud9.
Yes.
So FaZe would have to buy him out in that sense to be able to actually add him to the roster.
Right.
I wonder whether they would have to buy him out before they actually field him, or whatever's going on there.
I think Jack
presumably
would be,
they have some kind of understanding.
From speaking to players who have been on Cloud9 in the past, it does seem like Jack is very understanding about letting players actually play with other orgs and other teams. So I think if they wanted to start Surefour, they'd be able to, is all I mean.
Yeah, but it is kind of weird, because it seems like the Cloud9 players have been added kind of last minute to a lot of... Well, also, it seems like a lot of these rosters have kind of been confirmed last minute before Contenders started. And the roster deadline was today, but the roster lock it's not like locked for the entire tournament, so we could still see changes further down the line.
It's actually every week, right?
I think that's how it works. But which is essentially no roster lock.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
it's just a roster
lock 5 days in advance or something,
exactly.
just so that everybody knows what roster you're going to be fielding for that event, but it's not locked in the sense of you need to long-term commit to a solution. So, yeah, I mean, I thought somebody like Mistakes, somebody like Logix, somebody like Surefour would have been excellent. I didn't even have Carpe in my mind, actually, for FaZe. I kind of forgot that he was still around.
Yeah. In the nicest possible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be a legit team, though. They kind of fell off towards the end of Contenders Season 0, but if they can pick the pieces back together,
and if they can get to the LAN, then they have Shadowburn on LAN.
Oh God, that's a scary thought.
In fact, I wonder when Shadowburn is eventually going to move over to North America
it has
as well,
to happen
because
at some point.
He's been so reluctant, it seems. They've been planning it since January. I remember talking to the guys at MLG Vegas, and they were like, yeah, in 2 weeks, we're moving into a team house.
Those are a long 2 weeks.
Yeah, very long 2 weeks. Two weeks, FaZe time.
Well, okay. Yeah, Shadowburn on LAN, that's a scary thought. Honestly, that guy pounds in a lot of sense. At the World Cup, especially.
In a lot of sense.
It's literally, the innuendos are slipping from my mind. I don't have any inhibitions. Nothing is stopping me from saying these things because it's so late. You know, it's not my fault. Can we just edit this out?
Bren is running on tea and biscuits.
I'm struggling. I am serious. Right, let's go. Kungarna. That's the next one. Kungarna now going to be using their normal roster, so as they were before. This time Godstone. So again, another C9 member with Dream Casper as well. So I guess the Gods and Dream Casper subs. Again, it's Kungarna. Where are we seeing them right now, Harsha?
They're actually a team that always does better in tournament. I've talked to so many teams, and they all tell me Kungarna never does anything like well in scrims, and then all of a sudden they just destroy everybody on tournament. I've always underrated them. I don't really know where I expect them to finish, but I imagine around the 4th, 5th area, just because I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because of how, I don't know, how they always tend to do better. But at the same time, they did sign Gods and Casper, but I don't expect them to play much because Michael and Baby Bay are definitely two of the most vocal people on the team, and I think two of the leadership figures on the team, and I don't see them stepping down unless something major happens, right? You could potentially move Gods to the flex role or any role, to be honest. He's been playing every role very well except for, I guess we haven't really seen him on support, but I do think that Michael and Baby Bay are going to be fixtures on this team for sure.
They got a very interesting team, but the fact that they're using literally their roster from season 0 when there were so many
improvements.
And like rumors floating around of players trialing with different teams, and they were trialing different people, and Bishu even confirmed that he was off the roster at one point, and then they're actually just back with their season 0 roster. There are some serious plans here that I think fell through before the roster deadline came through. So this is a team that I think might develop as the season goes on as well, and you might end up seeing Gods or Dreamcasper come in and fill these main roles, or maybe Gods is playing like the flex tank and Bishu ends up going off somewhere else, wherever he was planning to go, or if they were planning to cut him or something. So it's an odd one. I'm very surprised actually to see them use their main roster from Contenders Season 0. I was expecting a big shuffle.
I'd known some of them were trialing with other teams and stuff like that, so definitely interesting to see that they all stuck together after all this time.
Well, next on the list we've got Retzi. That's a name that honestly has passed underneath me. Like I didn't even. You kind of just forget there's quite a few free agents, but Retzi is a standout player, and he's subbing for Renegades now for Contenders. Going to be taking out that sub role, so that's an interesting pickup for them. What are we thinking about this then, Sideshow? Is this filling in gaps that they probably maybe had? I mean, again, I'm going to be honest with you, not too familiar with the NA scene. Is it a pick that's necessary for them?
I don't think it is. I think this one is the most kind of
tacked on.
Yeah, and boring, if you can use that word. The most boring of the roster changes, actually, for Contenders, in terms of somebody that they've added to sub. I don't know whether they're just putting him on the bench, in case they need to use him, in case someone's sick or whatever. Retzi was a good player, for sure, but I think he was overrated in the sense that people really rated him like incredibly highly, and he was a good player, and at his peak when he was playing really well within within Rise Nation, he was a very good player, but people were touting him as if he was like a god tier, and there's just so many really sick DPS players, especially hit scan DPS players, that for me he really didn't deserve like that level of praise, but he is a very good player for sure, and adding him into Renegades, perhaps he'll like have something special that he's able to bring. But
the strange thing is he slots in exactly where Jesus already slots in, and like they play the exact same heroes, so it just seems a bit, I think it just does seem a bit tacked on to me. I think he's just going to literally just be a substitute and perhaps share scrim time and have a place to call home while Contenders Season 1's going on. I think,
fair enough.
Well, one interesting tidbit I wanted to add on is actually, I believe he was actually one of the shot callers for Rise Nation, one of the primary shot callers, rather. So I think that might have been part of the reason people rated him so highly.
Yeah, you have to bear in mind as well. I mean, that's interesting because Rise Nation as a team, I mean, when did they sort of disband and fall out of favor?
Early June,
roughly when was
July 1st, so something like that.
I mean, that was quite deep into dive meta, was it? Off the top of my head? Yeah. I'm the only reason I think that is because it was quite unusual for, I guess, triple tank teams more or less had Lucio main callers, right? This all when triple tank was a sort of meta, the supports is more common for him to call for them.
Whereas
I think FaZe did that as well.
Yeah,
though.
he did.
Yeah. Well, anyway, regardless of that, Christopher, moving on, trialing for EnVision. I saw over.gg leak this accidentally early by putting him on the team. Whoever that was.
We never leak.
Naughty boy, never leak. Never leak. Always planned. Christopher, so we were talking we were bigging him up earlier for the UK World Cup. He's now going to be trialing for EnVision. This makes sense because he's still got a US visa, assumedly. Assumedly, that's not even a word.
It's not now.
But
don't let it stop you though.
No, I won't. Don't you worry. But he was part of Hammers. Obviously, Hammers now disbanded, and he's still obviously in NA. I don't think he's moved back yet.
I forgot who their main tank was, but they had just lost him.
Kofi,
yeah. He wrote an article actually. Yeah, interesting. But I don't know. I don't really expect EnVision to do much again at this tournament. to be honest. So while I'm happy for Christopher, I don't think that the roster change means all that much.
No, I mean, he's just come into a team that should get absolutely beaten up on in Contenders Season 1. Same for GamersOrigin. You know, the two teams that have actually bought in were the two teams like a step below, but they were actually probably a whole tier below the rest of the teams that actually came in. So I expect both of them to just kind of be pummeled.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you heard it here first. EnVision, pub team.
Pubs.
Mixed team. Get them out of here. Sinatra, this is the next one. Sinatra.
Frank.
Goodness gracious me. What
To
a
his
guy.
friends.
Sub. He's going to be subbing now for the Big Daddy team in the West, EnVyUs. Now, what are we thinking about this now? What's the purpose of this when they've already got Effect?
Yeah.
You know, they've got these DPS players. What's going on here?
Yeah.
It's a crazy one.
Yeah. It's one of the best players in NA going to one of the best teams in NA. So
Yeah.
if there weren't only 6 roster spots that could play at any given time, I would be so excited about this. But the thing is, it's hard to see where he slots unless he's just playing the Zarya.
Here's the thing. I think it's actually like a 17D
Chess.
incredible intergalactic checkers move, right? Because everyone thinks of Sinatra for his tracer, but he's actually got a really legit Genji
and Zarya.
And Zarya.
Yeah.
And Genji was a big thing that they were always missing on this team.
Yeah.
That's true.
And Effect, they said that he could play Genji coming into it, but we actually haven't seen him play anything other than Tracer. I don't know how good his Genji really is. For Mickey, they also said that he had a stellar Zarya at the beginning, and it looked like he had a pretty good Zarya, but then whenever he was actually playing it, I don't know, maybe it didn't mesh with the team style or something like this, but Sinatra legitimately is like a real top tier Zarya player as well. He just seems to have that like natural talent, that natural born gamer prowess, where he's able to pick up anything.
He is a gamer.
He is a gamer. So I think everyone thinks about him as a Tracer, but I think Tracer will probably be where he spends some of the least of his time if he fits in, kind of complementing these players. But if they play him alongside, they could also play him like alongside Taimu, where he could pick up the Tracer and the Genji, you know. So Taimu's playing like the kind of fixed role, and he's playing more of a flex role within the team.
It's so weird that one of Taimu or Effect might sit out though, because these are two legitimately. I mean, these are players that could have contended for best in the world at different points in time, right? So.
Yeah, probably were. I mean,
yeah.
At certain times they certainly were.
Effect
like best
easily,
in a certain hero.
I mean, Effect easily had by far the best Tracer statistics. Obviously, they're just statistics. You have to take them with context, but definitely one of the best Tracer players in the world. Reached rank 1 in Korea, and then Taimu dominated the game for so long. So, I mean, definitely interesting to see how they're going to work Sinatra into that roster.
All right. Well. FNRGFE, complete mouthful of a team name. They've got Enigma, our overlord of over.gg, and Dummy as substitutes. Not really any surprises there, as far as I'm concerned, I believe. I mean, Enigma said he was taking a step back from competitive play to focus on over.gg. Dummy, you know, is friends with a lot of the players on FNRGFE.
I thought you were going to say is the problem.
Dummy is the problem.
Would have been brilliant.
Just appealing to the Reddit masses there, wouldn't I? It's just low-hanging fruit, but no. So no real question marks.
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of friends, former teammates of the people on FNRGFE. I think these kind of bench warmer subs. I mean, I really, even more so than Retzi, I don't see them actually being fielded unless someone's sick or something.
Yeah. And right, moving on to away from roster switches up, things like that. You know, I really wish I knew English for this job. It'd be just a fantastic.
Interesting.
Which language do you know?
Interesting that the Englishman can't speak English.
God Almighty, I'm so tired. Just let me rest. Clash of Titans, right? This is what you've listed it as, the Clash of Titans. We've got EnVyUs versus Rogue versus Immortals, these top 3 Western teams. The NA side of Contenders is going to be so goddamn stacked. It's going to be so fun to watch, to be honest, between these teams, and of course the other sort of selection that we got lower down from them. But it's going to be wild, man. It's going to be incredible.
I think potentially Okay, FaZe has always been a team that could potentially challenge the top tier. I don't know whether they will or not with this new addition. We need to see them play, obviously, but I do think that Immortals had come close to that level of Rogue when we saw them get 4-3 narrowly by Rogue in the Beat Invitational, and then EnVyUs has always been that strongest team. They had really close maps with Rogue towards the end of their stay in NA, and then did really well in Apex and leveled up. So like, I'm really excited to actually see where these teams stand. If I had to predict, actually, I think EnVyUs might be the best of them right now. But I think that Immortals has potential to level up and overtake every team here.
Yep. I think I would agree with that. I think it's actually awesome. I've never been as excited for a season since looking at some of the earlier seasons of Apex and looking at stuff like that, because this is like the Western version of Apex at the moment. These are the best teams in a long form season format with playoffs towards the end, and we've never had that before. The only times where we've had the literal best teams in the West, or like the best teams in a region of the West, North America or Europe, they've been playing in standalone tournaments that are kind of small. They don't always have the same people. You don't get to see all of the matchups. They're not round robin, so this is actually going to be phenomenal to see EnVyUs versus Rogue, and then Rogue versus Immortals, and then Immortals versus EnVyUs, and then all of these matchups, and then how they compete with these lower level teams, because certainly teams like FaZe, possibly even Kungarna, might be able to rise up and challenge these guys. So it really is going to be phenomenal. The Contenders NA particularly actually is going to be the better of the two regions, I think, in terms of which is going to be at the highest level, and which is just going to be amazing to watch, because these three teams are genuinely world class as well, which is another reason why it's just fantastic to have them back from Apex in that sense, because you've almost always had the best teams in the West over in Apex, and it creates this weird split between the regions.
All right, well, okay, and then obviously leading on, we touched on it a little bit, but then you've got FaZe, you've got Renegades, Kungarna, and FNRGFE. Wow, managed that one only on the second time, but yeah, and then there's these teams that sort of encompass this sort of second tier that's going to be sort of testing the waters against these the upper echelon of teams here. So yeah, it's going to be super hyped to watch. Contenders NA. Any thoughts on this, Harsha?
I mean, just what I said earlier about FaZe. I think that I think they're the team that I'm most interested to see if they can challenge that tier 1 of teams and break in there.
Well. Right. Okay. We've covered that. I've only got one more thing to talk about, guys. It's almost over. I say that like this podcast is something to dread. It won't normally be something like this. It's just that I'm so tired that we're gonna scoot through it. Contenders EU. That's what we're talking about now. Just trying to hype myself up a little bit with this. So, Misfits. I've got the roster changes. I'm getting wild, Sideshow. We're doing it.
He woke his
right,
man.
We got Misfits.
He just woke his man up again.
My nan is sleeping somewhere in the house. I've woken her up now. Sorry, Dad.
Incredible.
I'm so sorry.
Incredible.
Misfits, roster changes. The things I do for YouTube views. Logix and Zupe are going to be in now. So Logix, the sleeper pick of the century. A lot of people were debated into thinking that he was moving to FaZe, but now he's here on the Misfits roster, along with Zupe, who's moved from Giganti. So they've obviously reinforced now, is out of the team. I think he's still looking for a team, but he's gone. And now Zebasai is captaining. Is that correct?
Well, that hasn't actually been confirmed, I think, but that's pretty much...
Very likely.
Yes, I mean, if you read into it, I think it's fairly obvious that Zebasai is the captain. I would be very surprised if I've somehow misinterpreted that. And then also they brought in Swoosh, who's playing tank, which is the other massive change, because he was only known as like a flex DPS kind of guy, and mostly known to people who didn't pay that much attention to the European scene as a god tier Genji, and they didn't really know anything else.
So I actually had the chance to speak to him about the changes, and he did note that, in particular on Winston, he thinks the transition is going to be really easy because he knows how to play with a Winston, and so now he knows what he's expected to do, right? But I think that the hard transition is going to be the Reinhardt if that ever comes back into the metagame, and we are seeing more and more of it with the anti-dive composition. So he told me he'd been scrimming particularly like a lot against Fraggy just to make sure he could get his Reinhardt up to par, and he thinks he's going to be able to get there within Contenders.
Good training partner.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to go sparring with someone, then it might as well be fragging.
Yeah.
Man is a champion of Reinhardt, isn't he?
He certainly is. This roster in general looks excellent to me.
Yeah. And the Tavik Logix duo should be so good. I know it's going to pull Tavik off of the Tracer, but it's going to put him on the DPS where he's not on his own doing his own thing. He's going to actually be getting the resources as a Genji, getting the Zarya shields, or I don't know. Perhaps he's
just the space.
Exactly. And so I think that this is the kind of style I wanted to see Misfits try for so long, and now they're probably going to do it.
Yeah. Logix is a better Tracer than Tavik as well, in my opinion. Whenever I watched Tavik play Tracer, I felt like it was kind of wasted talent, because he was so good when he was playing previously on Genji, when they built teams around him before like that, and he was so good when he was on Soldier, that the fact that he had to play Tracer on that team, he has a strange playstyle in my opinion on Tracer as well, where he kind of plays from the mid distance, and he's got like incredibly consistent aim, but he doesn't seem to go for, when you compare him to somebody like Logix gets right up in your face, and it gets like a massive amount. Yeah, exactly. He gets like massive amount of damage on you, and he's gonna like burn down your supports, and then he's like dancing around you and stuff. It's very much more like in your face, creating space in your backline, whereas Tavik seemed to be consistent damage coming in from one direction, which is an odd way to play Tracer, I think, and didn't seem like the best utilization of it. Is obviously enormous talent, and so the fact that he's now paired up with Logix, I think, is going to be a brilliant DPS duo for them. And Logix as well, although people have only ever seen him on Tracer, basically back in previous teams he did play a plethora of he played McCree and a lot of Reaper. If you go way back and look at the teams when the Reaper meta, like the Beyblade meta was active, he was the Reaper player as well. So I mean, he's got more tools to his belt than just being a Tracer one trick.
Okay, right, now C9 Cloud9, formerly known as Laser Kittens, as we all know. They've lost Munchkins, right, and Claris. Munchkins, we discussed it earlier. Largely, I think a lot of people would consider Munchkins to be one of their best players. I see you've just deleted a little bit here. Nevix in. Nevix in. Thanks for adding that bit on the Google Doc. Live updated.
Yeah,
and, they've
because
included Nevix. I don't know why you put mistakes.
Well, yeah, because I previously had some info that was out of date there, Bren.
I was literally about to read it.
I know you were, because
I'm so glad you're looking
you
out
applied
for
with
me.
an auto cue.
I'm literally.
So I just monitored, what you were going to say and fixed it live for you.
Excellent. Nevix is in. Now, Nevix coming into the team, it was something that my tiny pea brain couldn't comprehend really, mainly because I felt like, Nevix mainly known for his Genji play. Not necessarily that he's a god tier Genji, but he plays it well. But they, as far as I know, Laser Kitten's already had a decent Genji player. I was wondering what sort of role he was going to fill. If anything, this leaves gaps in Cloud9 if you look at them on paper.
So what I've actually been told is that Nevix will be slotting in with as a hit scan DPS, and he's actually, so while he is mostly known for the Genji nowadays, he actually played quite a lot of Soldier, and he managed to hit rank 1 and 2 in both, I think in Season 1, Season 2, and perhaps Season 3. Mainly using the McCree, so his hit scan is definitely not bad. I just need to see how it plays out in the pro metagame.
The weird thing about this whole setup, though, is that the trio that they're using, that's like on the DPS or flex role, is odd to me, because Kib has been playing the Diva. If you talk to people who've been looking at recent scrims and stuff like that and the recent tournaments, Kib's been on the Diva as far as I know. From talking to a couple of people, so presumably they've had Krems on Soldier and whoever else they've been trialing.
They might be running the Tracer Soldier composition more, though.
It's possible, but the strange thing about it is that they don't really have a dedicated, what we would consider a flex or off tank player. I think Krems is a very talented Soldier, but I have yet to really be impressed by the other heroes that he's got in his tool belt. And Kib was a very good Roadhog and a very good Genji, but isn't, I think, a natural Diva or Zarya player, although I think he's relatively good at them as well. And from talking to other players, it seems like Laser Kittens are a real contender for Contenders Europe Season 1, but it's a weird format that they have within their team, I think, that where I can't really wrap my head around how they're going to... I can't model the team in my head, because the way that it's listed on their website and stuff is that Kib's the projectile DPS player, Nevix is the hit scan player, Krems is the flex. But in my head, I haven't really seen like that flex role come out from Krems. I haven't seen him like really perform well on the Diva or Zarya.
He just mostly plays the
I've
soldier.
only really seen him play soldier, yeah. So it's a strange setup for me that they're now going to be passing those duties over to Nevix, and I think the burden is really on Krems to perform at the level where
it honestly might just be one of those teams where all three of them are flex players. I know Nevix has played Zarya in the past. Kib plays the Diva, obviously, for them. Maybe they're all going to be slotting around. I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Where have you seen that before?
The Nevix Zarya?
Misfits, yeah. No. Like people rotating roles and stuff like this, and not really having like a key identity. It's I'm slightly concerned without any real evidence to go on, right? This is just my gut feeling, is that it seems a bit odd to me, the way that they're running. So I'm looking forward to watching them and seeing how they've actually set up their team, because that trio to me is strange.
Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3 as a team. They've cut Kodak, right? As far as I'm aware.
A while back,
and they were trialing different players. One of them being Hafikul. You may know him from the mid-tier NA meme, where he's most famous for. I know him just because he's just a banterous individual, very savage, just doesn't actually care. I love people like that. He's brilliant for just esports in general, to be honest. You just need people like him. He's brutal, he's savage. Yeah, and also they were trialing Fincy as well. So they actually ended up deciding, Hafikul would still be on the role that Kodak would be, basically replacing Kodak. But as they were trialing both Fincy and Hafi, they actually lost Mistakes, arguably one of the best tracers in EU, and they've picked up Fincy instead. Fincy is a player who is not really known for his tracer.
Not at all.
Yeah, as far as replacements go, he's not necessarily a bad one, but he's got a lot to prove.
It's meant large role shifts within the team as well, I think. I mean, you can't just slot Finzy in and just have him replace Mistakes, because Mistakes was an elite level DPS player, specializing in Tracer, and was providing a huge amount of damage carry potential for that team. And Finzy has primarily got his Zarya and his Soldier, and they've already got Snillo, who's a legit elite level soldier,
very
as
good
well.
soldier. Yeah.
So I think Finzy may then be working on the Diva or something like this, and have him more on the flex off tank role, and have Hafikul more on DPS. It'll be interesting to see how they actually work with that, because Hafikul, as far as I'm aware, has the larger hero pool of them.
Ego.
Yes, the larger ego has the larger hero pool, and it like extends more into the DPS out of the two of them. But is also not really a star player, He's not somebody that you're going to build around in terms of him being a DPS player. That's why the flex role on this team actually looked like it suited him so well. But in classic Hafikul cursed fashion, he's joined a team just as they lose their best player, and could well end up performing far worse and dropping down into being a mid-tier EU team. I mean, it could well happen. I mean, if he had come in instead of Kodak, I think that would have been a fairly big improvement for the team, actually.
All right.
But strange.
Yeah. All right. Giganti. They've lost Zupe now. They've signed Shaz. So Shaz is also Finnish, right? So
yeah,
he is. Yes.
Yeah.
You're nodding.
Yes. Yeah.
Nod to me. Yeah. So they haven't lost anything in terms of keeping that all Finnish roster. What sort of role does Zupe have in Giganti?
What do you mean in terms of like calling or something like this?
Yeah, mainly calling, I guess. Have they lost anyone important with this role swap?
I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah, he was a skilled player, but I don't know if he was a vocal player of any kind. I honestly don't know.
He was actually a very skilled player. I think he's one of the players that tends to get underrated in the scene. He was a really, really good Ana player, and actually his transition over to Zen was very good. when you consider that he was brought into the team as kind of an Ana one trick when he first joined. He was just an Ana that had picked it up before everybody else had and got high in the ranked. And then he played basically Ana the whole time for like 5 months or something. All he was playing was Ana. And then he had to go full on and switch to Zenyatta, starting with Zenyatta when they were playing tanks as well. So he was just getting dived all the time. And then they moved over to add like the D.Va into the team and play dive themselves. So Zuppy's actually had a great transition. I think he's a really good pickup for Misfits. But Shaz is also pretty excellent. Like a real standout support player.
All right, well, okie dokie. Now, on the side of Bazooka Puppiez, they brought in Hidan as a sub. Now, what team did Hidan play on
Ice
before?
Block. It was Ice Block, I think.
Ice Block. Now, what?
And then before that,
Misfits. Misfits before that.
Well, LG and then Misfits before that.
Yeah.
Misfits is where people know him from, though.
Bazooka Puppiez again, a team that's sort of just they've drifted by my peripheral vision when it comes to the EU scene. Haven't really had a standout performance in Contenders Season 0. Obviously qualified for Season 1, but I'll be interesting to see how they perform in this season at least. But Hidan, what is this sub role? Is this another bench warmer, or is he going to be providing something else?
I'm not sure actually. I mean, he could be a bench warmer, or he could be like being rotated around or potentially even trialed. When Hidan played for Misfits, and when they were at LAN in particular, he looked like a monster. But then every time they played online, and when he moved over to Luminosity as well, and I haven't actually caught any of his games on Ice Block because they haven't been in any big tournaments really, he didn't look amazing. So it's strange to me. I mean, he's kind of existing on the fact that he's like a championship winner with Misfits in the Overwatch Open, I think, which is strange because that was so long ago. But
almost
he obviously does have talent. Yeah, I don't know. That's another weird one for me.
Okay, well, we'll just brush by that anyway. We don't care. Let's go to GamersOrigin now. So this team that we're sort of, I guess, pinning down to be one of the lowest tier teams currently in Contenders. Can't really argue against it. I'd love to be proven wrong, but they're also making some changes. So they've actually brought in Leaf and Pipu in for, now how you pronounce that one, not too sure, but ZYKK, Zik, I guess you could say, and Nokia.
Nokia.
Not Nokia. Yeah, Zik and Nokia. But yeah, they've changed out a couple of their players, and Leaf's come back in. I actually thought that Leaf was good,
good player,
before. It was strange that they got rid of him. I think was it him that posted stuff recently about the Doomfist? He's clearly been playing a huge amount of that.
He put up a Doomfist guide recently. Yeah.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, he's been playing a lot of that. And Pipu as well, it has been around the scene forever, and he's very highly respected within the French scene. Even the Rogue guys speak super highly of him in terms of his understanding of the game. And if you're getting respect like that from the Rogue guys, clearly you're doing something right.
They don't respect a lot.
Exactly. Well, in terms of like coaching staff and stuff like that,
there's a kimchi reference in here somewhere.
but yeah, Pipu, he used to be a player on like Melty and a lot of these other French teams. I think he played for Bonjour, and then he was coaching as well. So he's done like half and half. He sometimes hops in and plays support. Sometimes he coaches, depending on what the team needs, I suppose, or what he feels he wants to do. But he's back out there playing Lucio for GamersOrigin. These, in my opinion, should be upgrades, but I don't think they're really upgrades to bring GamersOrigin to the point where they're going to contest with the other teams. They just played the Asus ROG finals against Giganti, and they got gigantically smashed.
Yeah. Save that one for your next over.gg article.
Yeah.
Nice little pun to stick in there. No, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I watched that. It's interesting. This sort of meta, this patch that Doomfist is developing is one that I'd consider quite strong for Giganti. I'm expecting them to do reasonably well, at least in Contenders. But GamersOrigin, you know, they've got a bit of time in between now and Contenders is a 6-week long event. You know, they can learn from their mistakes from the games. They can learn from their opponents as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of time between then and now, realistically. Okay, we're in the section where we can now just rate the teams, as Harsha wants me to do. I didn't mean that in a bitchy way. I do genuinely think that's a good idea. Let's rate the teams in this EU Contenders bracket. I'll start with my sort of predictions here. Now, before this, I would have actually labelled this in a different order, but now that we've had this chat about Contenders, in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit different now. But so E United, number 1, I think, no doubt really about that. It'll be a bit of an upset if they were taken off that top spot, at least. Now, these next few spots are something that's sort of up in the air for me, because I initially thought 1, 2, 3, but with the changes they're making with Kodak being missing and mistakes going, they could honestly end up quite lower, because as you mentioned, Sideshow earlier on, they might have to change their play style, but I would still pin them quite highly, and then I'd probably put Cloud9 up with them as well. And then the rest of it is honestly probably going to be anywhere. It's going to be quite hard to predict from that point on, but at least my top 3 would be at least E United, 1, 2, 3, and then Cloud9.
I actually think Misfits is going to be quite good at this event. I think they're going to place probably top 2, and I think that the only team... Because I don't know, I think that this DPS duo is just so good that they have to do... If they don't make it now, I don't see them ever making it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think they're going to finish top 2 with E United. I think E United is still certainly the best team in EU, and they have to be dethroned first. And then I expect Cloud9 to actually do better than 1, 2, 3. I think that... it's hard to say because Cloud9 lost Munchkin, who I do rate very highly as one of the better tracers in the world. But then Mistakes also lost, I think, the person who was hard carrying them. Did I say Mistakes? I meant 1, 2, 3 also lost Mistakes, who was the...
Yes.
Perhaps the player hard carrying them through. So I think that Cloud9 will actually do better.
Yeah. It's quite possible. I think E United and Misfits should be the top 2. And if Misfits flop again, in the same way that when people were looking at the triple shuffle kind of going on, and they looked at Nevix and Tvik and they thought, oh god, that's a beastly DPS duo, and they failed to make anything happen consistently. If similar things like that happen to this version of Misfits, I mean, you just need to just cut the entire roster and start again or something.
Sell the pieces.
Because... yeah, I mean, there is something going wrong if they can't make this roster work, but they should be able to do it. I think that, like you guys think, I think they're going to be up there with E United. I think those are going to be the top 2 teams. The next tier of teams, I mean, 1, 2, 3 is a weird one, because the way that they got so good is that they absolutely grinded, like crazy dedication, put in a huge amount of time, worked on that dive meta that was so prevalent, and managed to push themselves up there. They had good individual skill as well. Mistakes, Tonic, really good players. They had, Snillo's really good as well, and Bok 1 is actually very good as well. So, but the changes that they made are very odd. I mean, they don't have the fact that they've brought in...
It's just completely changing their style, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Completely changing their style.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they brought in Finzi, they didn't even try and to bring in somebody who would fill Mistakes' role exactly. They've chosen to switch up their style, and they spent months grinding through to perfect their style beforehand. They're not a team, it would appear, that can just launch into a new style and just pick it up immediately. So for me, I would expect a dip in performance from 1, 2, 3. Cloud9, I don't think they're going to be having a dramatic rise to the point where they can compete with New Misfits and E United, despite the fact that there's like rumblings that they're a real top tier team. I can't really see that on paper, so I don't know whether I truly believe that, but I think they'll probably be slightly above 1, 2, 3. Unlike you guys, though, I'm actually predicting a bit of a surge from Giganti. I believe in these guys. I think they can probably make it, because I don't think getting Shazin is a drop in their the talent that's on their roster, even though Zuppe was really good. And the fact that they've got Davin in now as well, I think they've got some real potential to like compete with those top teams.
Perhaps the time they had to mesh with their new roster will make the difference, because they did have Davin before, didn't they?
When they had Davin for like the
of...
latter half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think
I agree with you with Giganti. I didn't touch on it when I was talking about my tiers, but I'd say in that sort of the top 3 would which I already mentioned. I'd say Giganti almost fall into that bracket. They're very close to it, and this meta, as I mentioned before, is one that's going to suit them with a very heavy sort of traditional tank comps. We'll see where they land in it. They were definitely running it a lot with the Republic of Gamers tournament that took place in Finland. Running a lot of Reinhardt. Fraggy was on that signature role again. Reinhardt's had some changes as well recently, so he's been having some improvements, along with Zarya, so definitely the time to pull it out, if any. But no, I do agree, yeah. We are in agreement.
We are.
All right. Is that all? Have I discussed everything?
That was a lot, Bren. That was a lot. This is an incredibly long episode.
I'm sweating.
We're about to hit 2 hours and 10 minutes.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. All right. Let's pack it up. I'm ready for bed. Now, the joke is, like, tomorrow I'm gonna catch my flight. I've got to get up at this time. Right
no,
now.
you don't. Isn't that? Oh, really? Oh, yeah, you do. Wow.
Yeah, because my flight's at 9 a.m. ish, and I want to get to the airport for about 2.5 hours before. It takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to drive there.
Thanks for your travel plan.
No problem. I don't know why I'm telling you this. But yeah, so I've got to be up at roughly this time. Maybe a bit before, or maybe a bit after. I don't know.
Get your beauty sleep, Brent. If any of us need the beauty sleep.
It's definitely me.